Hey, John Ty here, and welcome to the Self-Publishing Summit. Our guest today is a very successful internet entrepreneur and the New York Times bestselling author of The Laptop Millionaire. He began his online career in 2004 in spectacular fashion, going from zero to $10,000 a month in just 28 days. And since then, he's founded the Inspired Marketing Group, which has organized successful events around the world and trained thousands of entrepreneurs. And he's here today to talk about how to get a New York Times bestseller. Our guest today, Mark Anastasi. Mark, welcome to the Self-Publishing Summit.
Thank you, John. Thank you for the invitation.
So, Mark, great to have you on. I've been lucky enough to attend some of your events, which have been a lot of fun. Looking forward to the next time you're going to be in London. And I've given a little overview there. We're going to focus the main part of this presentation on how to get a New York Times bestseller. And I'm really looking forward to that because, as I mentioned before we came on air, we've touched on that with some of the other authors. We've had other New York Times bestselling authors on the summit, but nobody's really focused in on that and given a lot of specific strategies and tactics. So looking forward to that. But before we do, you've got this crazy number where you went from zero to $10,000 in a month, basically. And, a lot of people have had success online, but there are very, very few who've done it so quickly. So give us just a little bit of the backstory. What was it you did to generate that success?
Sure. Well, as I know, John, my backstory is that I used to work as a security guard in the UK, and that was my job for 2 years. That was my first ever job when I was living in the UK. And I found myself being £7,000 in debt. I was unemployed. I was living in an abandoned building where I was basically squatting an abandoned building together with other 20 homeless people. And one day I found out about this seminar. It was a personal development seminar in Earl's Court, actually, at the end of Old Brompton Road. And I attended that seminar. I attended that personal development seminar, and the person sitting next to me, his name was Francis, eventually became my mentor, and he showed me how he was selling ebooks on the internet. And I thought to myself, well, that sounds pretty simple. I could maybe do this. I don't have any money, but I can imagine putting up a website and selling some ebooks. Why not? He told me how he did it. It was very simple. It was just a 5-minute conversation on the phone, actually. He told me, you've got to choose a target market. You've got to find out what they want, create the product, to create the ebook with the answers to their problem or their issues. Then create a website where you can sell the product to that target market. And fourthly, drive traffic to that website to sell the product to that target market. It took me about 2 weeks to create my first ebook. It took me another week to figure out how to set up a website. And in the end, I hired a web designer, and I said to the web designer, who was from Hungary, his name was Attila, I said to him, listen, I don't have any money to pay you, but set up the website for me, and I'll pay you from the profits from the website. And he agreed to that. And the last few days were about, I was trying to figure out how to drive traffic to that website. And I started with using Google AdWords. So I was spending about $10 to $15 a day on my 8th and final credit card, $10 to $15 a day on Google AdWords. And I was buying traffic for my keywords for about, I seem to recall, it was about 5 cents per click to about 10 cents per click. The upshot of it was that for about $10 to $15 a day, I was getting about 300 visitors a day. And out of every 300 visitors, sorry?
I said that's good, yeah. It's not as cheap as that today, sadly.
Very cheap, very cheap. This was back in 2004, mind you. So I was getting 300 visitors a day, and about 295 of them were saying no. They were saying no to me. They were saying, no, I don't want to buy your ebook. But 5 people a day were buying my ebook at $67 per ebook. That's $330 a day. So I would wake up in the morning, and I would have already made, while I was sleeping in the UK, I was already making $200 to $300, sometimes $400 or $500 while I was sleeping, because people in the US were buying my ebook. And that was from one ebook. And then a couple of months later, I launched another 5 ebooks. The following, I think by the end of the year, I launched another. So within a year, I had 31 ebooks selling online. By 2006, it was generating about $500,000 a year in passive income just from selling ebooks. I remember specifically in 2006, I worked 2 hours on that business throughout the entire year, because I spent 2006 running large-scale seminars. We had 1,000 people attend the Mental Game of Money. We had 800 people attend the Internet Millionaires Bootcamp. We had very successful large-scale seminars. And so that was the starting point with selling ebooks online. And the amazing thing is that the ebooks that I published back in 2004, 2005 are still selling to this day. And that's one of the great benefits from having this type of information marketing business, is that you create the product and it works for you practically forever. It just keeps generating sales for you over and over again.
Yeah, that is very special, isn't it? Getting that, getting things set up to have that passive income coming through, and then you got a formula that works. And like you say, you repeated it. You went from 1 to 31, $500,000 in passive income basically within a couple of years by the time 2006 rolled around. And you have the time then to focus on the other business, which is building up the seminars. So love that story, because, you know, way to take action, go from basically, you know, homeless in a squat to making $500,000. Well, $10,000 in a month is impressive enough just to do that in 28 days. And then $500,000 a year passive income within a couple of years is.
But I should point out something. Because as you're relating that story back to me, I realized that I missed out on an important point, which is this. People listen to that and think that it was the strategy that did it. They assume that, oh, it was because he met this guy who became his mentor, or because his mentor shared with him a strategy. The fact is that everyone knew about that strategy. It wasn't a big secret. What I missed out saying is that I actually spent 3 days when I came back from that seminar. I spent 3 days identifying and eliminating my limiting beliefs about money and about myself, and basically using neuro-linguistic programming or NLP tools basically to delve into my subconscious mind, as it were, to find out what had prevented me up to that point in reaching success. And so this is very important. The point is that I had to do that work on myself first on a subconscious level before I could even think about, hey, maybe I should call up that guy sitting next to me at the seminar and he can help me, and then following through to having that success. This is very important for me to share with people, because if you don't have the mindset that is required for achieving success in self-publishing, in ebooks, in getting your book on the New York Times Bestseller list, running a seminar and having thousands of people attending your events, for example, there needs to be a mindset of success that is cultivated first within yourself. People tend to think that, hey, I'll sell 1 million books, then I'll be successful. Or I'll make $10,000 a month, or $100,000 a month, and then I'll be successful. No, you've got to become a successful person, and then those great things will happen naturally and organically. You will attract the right circumstances, and you will follow through in the correct way because of your mindset.
Yeah, I'm really glad you mentioned that. And one of the things we talk about in NLP is syntax, and I like the syntax of become a successful person, then you'll have success, rather than say most people flip it the other way around, which is perhaps one of the issues. And I absolutely agree. You know, without the mindset, you can have all the tools in the world. You know, you could give somebody your New York Times best-selling blueprint and everything else, but if they don't believe they're going to succeed, if they don't take, you know, they're not going to take the action, and it won't happen. So mindset is absolutely paramount. And I think, you know, one of the things I really like about you, Mark, and what you do is that, you know, you are a person that takes massive action. You know, you showed that with the ebooks. You showed that with the seminar business you built up after that. And of course, you know, we'll get to the New York Times campaign and all of that later on. And you demonstrated it again there. So, you know, proving what you've just said, which is that you've got to get that mindset straight first. And NLP is a great way of doing that, because we all have those limiting beliefs, right? You know, I don't know anybody who doesn't. We will have doubts. It's just part of the human condition. So, you know, you need...
What's interesting about this, sorry to interrupt there, John.
That's okay. I was pretty much done.
As you're mentioning some things, it gives me some ideas of what to share, which is that people love buying strategies. People love learning strategies, something external to themselves. Because they don't need to take responsibility. Their life isn't really not their responsibility or their fault in a way. The results is not down to them. It's because they haven't got the right strategy. Somebody didn't share with them the right strategy yet. So
Yeah.
it's easy to avoid taking responsibility. What I realize that successful people have to do is they have to take responsibility for their mindset, for their thinking, for how they created their lives so far, the good and the bad, and realize, hey, I created this, I can create something else. So very often when I talk about mindset, and I love sharing this with my audiences, people don't really like that message because the focus is themselves. They have to take responsibility for their thinking and how they create their lives. And then on top of that, yes, they need to find out the right strategy.
Yeah. I think people don't like that because that message takes away the excuses. But I would say, until you step up and take responsibility, things don't change. I was at a point in my life. I won't go into it now because it'd take too long. But there was a point in my life a few years ago when things were not going well. A bunch of things had gone wrong in fairly short order, and I had to look at that and say, well, in one way or another, I'm responsible for those, directly or indirectly. There's some of the decisions that I made that have led to where I am now. And that was when things started to change for me, when I properly took responsibility for that. And I stepped it up actually a notch just a couple of months ago, maybe 3 months ago now. I interviewed Jack Canfield. And you probably know Jack's work, Mark. And one of the things he hammers home at the start of his book, The Success Principles, is you've got to take 100% responsibility. And I realized as I was talking to Jack about this, that I probably, even now, there were times when I wasn't taking 100% responsibility. But the more you take, the more your life is going to change. So I'm glad we had a chance to chat about this, because it is game-changing and life-changing stuff. Good.
Right.
So you had this tremendous success with the ebooks, partly as a result of that mindset shift and the NLP. You created a very successful seminar business, and then in 2012, you brought out your New York Times best-selling book, The Laptop Millionaire. And although I'd love to go into the seminar stuff, I don't think we're going to have time to cover that part of your business and everything else. So let's skip to 2012, and I guess the first question is, why 2012 did you decide to, because obviously you had the ebook history, but what was it about the Laptop Millionaire that you decided to bring it out when you did and make that a big part of your business strategy?
Well, I wouldn't say that I made it a big part of my business strategy. In other words, there wasn't much strategy beforehand, but I'll tell you a bit about my thinking, and I'll just touch upon briefly my seminar business and why I launched this. You see, whether I'm sharing information via ebooks, webinars, Google Hangouts, seminars, or physical books, hardback books, to me, it's kind of the same thing. These are just platforms for me to get a message out there. And we've had 16,000 people attend our seminars over the years. When I was completely down in the dumps, and I was homeless, and I was depressed and in debt, I made a vow that this was not going to be the end. I wasn't going to kill myself. I was going to use this. I was going to turn things around. And I vowed that I would turn things around, and then I would devote my life to helping other people do the same. And so running those seminars came very naturally to me, because I'd attended a seminar on personal development. It changed my life. It felt natural for me to pay it forward, as it were. But also I wanted to share with as many people as possible, hey, look, this is where I was. I just did a few minor shifts to my mindset. It took me 3 days with just a pen and a journal. It didn't cost any money, just a pen and journal. And I identified my limiting beliefs. I did these exercises, blasted through them, and it didn't cost any money. But suddenly, within 28 days, I started making $10,000 a month in passive income. In fact, the first couple of months until I started receiving the checks, I was still homeless, but I was making $10,000 a month. It was a surreal situation. You had to wait.
You're probably the only person ever to be in that situation.
Checks, they had to clear. And then anyway, it was a bit surreal. But the point is that I ran these seminars, and for anybody who's interested in running seminars, make it a big part of your self-publishing business, because it's just another way of reaching out to people in much more intimate and direct way. You're there in front of them. You get to meet them. You get to press the flesh and meet them in the flesh. And it has a much bigger impact. Your words, your ideas, your philosophies, as it were, have a much bigger impact on people when it's in a live, total immersion type of environment. And so, Dr. John DeMartini says that his marketing strategy for his seminars is just he had a very clear vision of hundreds of thousands of people around the world attending his seminars. That was his marketing plan. If I can just see it very clearly in my mind, it's going to happen. What I'm saying is that if you have an intention of helping a lot of people and you want to do it powerfully, doing seminars is something that comes very naturally. My marketing wasn't extraordinary by any stretch of the imagination, by any standard, but there was such an eagerness and a genuineness to it, I'd like to think anyway. I really wanted people to be there. I really believed that they could change their lives once they took responsibility, for example, once they learned these things. And so we had 16,000 people come to the event. By 2012, I thought to myself, okay, I'm liking this, but this is not going fast enough.
Yeah.
How can I take the best of all the seminars that we've done, put it into a easy, simple to consume format, a book, for example, a 200-page, 250-page book that can be translated, that can be shared with people around the world. So you asked me why in 2012 did I publish this? There wasn't some great business strategy behind it, although I added a little bit of strategy afterwards. But it was just an intention, the same intention since 2004. How can I get the best life-changing information to as many people's hands as possible and into as many languages as possible as well? And I can't be in 500 different locations at the same time doing a seminar on the same day or every single day, but the books can reach out to more people. Also lately, I've been thinking about how Wayne Dyer, Deepak Chopra, they've published 60, 70 books each, so maybe even more. And I've only published one book, so I've got quite a bit of catching up to do to achieve the kind of recognition that I want to follow in their footsteps, in a sense. And so, so that's kind of my strategy moving forward. I want to write and publish many more books. So 2012, I launched the book. Actually, what happened was that I was on holiday in 2011 with my sister and my brother-in-law. They're from France. I'm actually French. My sister's living in France. She's living in France. And I told my brother-in-law about my first ever webinar. And I was really excited about it. And I mentioned, hey, we just did our first webinar. We had 800 people on the webinar. It generated $200,000 in 90 minutes. And I kept having my breakfast as I said that, and I started thinking about something else. But I realized when I looked at him that he had dropped his spoon. He couldn't believe his ears. And I realized that Mathieu, my French brother-in-law, even though he'd been in the family for a few years, he had no idea about how powerful these marketing strategies that we were sharing at our UK-based seminars really were. It was like, geez, I need to have this in French. I can give it to my sister and my brother-in-law and my French family and friends and things like that so they can benefit from it. And that kind of seeded the idea of writing a book that I could share with more people. And at the same time, I thought, okay, I want to share this. I want to share this with more people. And what would be a great way of doing this? So I got myself a mentor. I got myself a mentor for ebooks, a mentor for the seminar business, and now I needed a mentor for the publishing world. And I hired one, and he told me, because I was planning to self-publish, and he said, yes, Mark, if you self-publish, you will make more money faster. But if you don't really care about the money up front, and you want to kind of leave more of a legacy or have more, build your brand further, he said, I recommend that you get published by a big 8 New York publishing company. So apparently there are these 8 large New York-based companies. Wiley is one of them. And I'd studied about publishing, and he said, well, one of the easiest ways to get published is if somebody who's already published a book, as a publisher, if they introduce you to their publisher. So that's what I did. I had a friend introduce me to Wiley. I think within a week or 2 weeks, we had the book contract signed. They sent me a $10,000 advance. They said, we love the book. I'd spent a couple of months writing it that summer, 2011. We love the book. Now here are 10 pages of all the changes we want you to do in the book. So you see, when you self-published, I could have gotten that book to market much sooner, but I spent 8 months rewriting that book 8 times to meet with their criteria and meet with exactly how they needed it to be. But now that product became such an excellent product. We've sold over 100,000 copies of the Laptop Millionaire, and it's been sold in bookstores all around the world. It got me on television channels and covers of magazines and business magazines and things like that, the New York Post and all kinds of cool things like that, which I don't believe I would have achieved that level of, I want to say notoriety. I'm not sure that's the right word, but and I don't want to use the word fame, but that level of recognition, shall we say, if it had been just self-published. I would have probably made more money up front if I'd self-published it, but I wasn't looking to make money just from selling the book. I literally, I just wanted the book to go out there into as many people's hands as possible. But then we generated $1.7 million in 12 weeks, and that was a bit of strategy. And in fact, actually, I used a lot of strategy to get the book onto the New York Times bestseller list. That was quite a coordinated campaign that lasted about 4 months.
Yeah. Well, that's a perfect time to talk about that. So again, I know you were very strategic about that. So let's talk about that. If we have time afterwards, we can touch back on the how you made the 1.7 million in 12 weeks as well. That'd be quite interesting. But take us through some of the key strategies that you used to actually, because you made sure that it became a New York Times bestseller.
Yes, well, I'm a strong believer in modeling. This is something I learned from the whole Tony Robbins philosophy of personal development. If you want to become a successful real estate investor, model a successful real estate investor. You want to become a successful boxer, model the training routine of successful boxers, the mindset of successful boxers, the coaching programs, the sleeping patterns, whatever, of successful boxers, for example. And same thing with if you want to be a New York Times bestselling author, model what people did, what authors did to achieve that outcome. And I did my research. I found out that Jack Canfield, talking about Jack Canfield mentored Tim Ferriss. And Tim Ferriss used that specific strategy to almost guarantee that his book was going to become a New York Times bestseller. And what the strategy involves is this little bit of knowledge, which is that the criteria, the main criteria, because there are a few, the main criteria for getting on the New York Times bestseller list is you need to sell up to about 7,000 to 11,000 copies of your book in a 1-week period. Now, there are more criteria. For example, it's got to be through specific retailers in the US. And so here's the strategy that Tim Ferriss and many others have followed very, very successfully, which is this. You pre-sell your book. You spend 1, 2, 3, 4 months pre-selling your book to reach 7, 8, 9, 10,000 in pre-sales. And then you have all the sales go through in a single week. So between January and April 2012, my book came out in April 2012. So between January and April, I was putting together, I put together a page. You can still see it on laptopmillionaire.tv. I got a link on there to that page. We basically did a book pre-launch, and where we gave away bonuses for people who would buy 5 copies of the book, 30 copies, 50 copies, 100 copies, 500 copies, 1,000 copies. If you bought 500 copies of the book, you could be a sponsor at one of my events. If you bought 500 copies, you could get a speaking slot at one of my events. If you bought 1,000 copies, you could license my DVD home study courses, for example. If you bought 30 copies, you would also get these extra, you would be able to watch and study some of these home study courses for free. So we basically, I think I put together about 30 different bundles. And like I said, that page, I think is still available on Tim Ferriss's website. He still has that 24-hour or 48-hour land rush campaign. It's on there on his website. And also on my website, laptopmillionaire.tv, there's still that campaign that's on there. And essentially, it really took about a couple of months to put together all these offers, and then maybe another month to pre-sell the 10,000 copies. We managed to pre-sell about 10,000 copies. And then within a 1 week period, when the book came out, all of the book sales went through in that single week period. And the following week, we were in the New York Times bestseller list.
So yeah, I mean, that's very impressive. 10,000 sales. I know it wasn't in a week because you'd pre-sold them, but to go through in a week. And I think, the key point obviously is that if you fall short, you get 5,000 sales, that's still impressive, but it won't get you on the list.
Apparently depends on the week. Some weeks, maybe there are many books that achieve that milestone. But I've heard that people with as little as 7,000 sales get on the New York Times bestseller list. But it depends.
Yeah.
They told me reach 11,000 to be sure. In the end,
okay.
my book was number 6 on the bestseller list. That specific week, probably every week, there are cookbooks and diet books and the Laptop Millionaire. So, but yeah, that was basically what the campaign entailed. And I'll just point out this thing, which I expected that we would get a lot of 1 or 3 or 5 or 10 book sales. In the end, from my mailing list, we only got about 1,000 book sales from my mailing list, but I expected it to be much more, but it was only about 1,000. And the bulk of it came from 14 sales that I made of 500 books. So we sold 7,000 books to just about 14 key buyers. And so that's very interesting. This is the 80-20 rule.
Yeah.
That was like more than like the 90-10 rule there. But the idea with this is, what can you offer? Because the people didn't want to receive 500 copies of the book. They wanted a few books. But really, why they were buying these 500 books was for the bonuses that they were getting. And the fact is that because we did that campaign, because the book reached the New York Times bestseller list, we sold another 90 or 100,000, probably more by now, copies, because people buy, people follow the herd. So when they see, hey, this book was liked by a lot of people, it became a New York Times bestseller, I'm going to buy it as well. And also bookstores around the world want, they have limited shelf space. They're not going to put up there just any random book. If a book has become a New York Times bestseller list, they're going to ask the publisher, yes, please send me these books for us to sell in Australia, in South Africa, in France, and all around the world. And also publishing companies around the world will contact your publisher saying, we want to get this book translated in all these different languages because it's a New York Times bestseller. There's only, I believe there's only about 500 books a year, approximately, give or take, that become New York Times best-selling books. What my mentor explained to me was this: about 2.2 million books a year get published. The average book will never sell more than 3,000 copies. And even 3,000 copies, that's good going for most books that get published. If you really want to get, jump ahead by leaps and bounds over other experts or people in your industry, aim to get your book on the New York Times bestseller list. Now, what is definitely a prerequisite for this, I would say, is to build your audience first. Build your mailing list and your audience first, your fan base, as it were. If you have 10,000 people that love your work, great, you can get your book onto the New York Times bestseller list. But I think it would be a disservice to say to people, hey, if no one knows you and, next week you can have a New York Times bestseller. You need to put in the time and the work to establish your tribe first.
Yeah, that's interesting. And one of the points that's been made on previous presentations within the summit is that you want to start your marketing as soon, either before you start writing your book or as soon as. You don't wait until the book is done and then start the marketing. Unless you've already written the book, obviously you start as soon as you can. But I mean, a key point that comes out of what you just said is the idea of a tipping point. And there's, two. One is that tipping point to get you onto the list in the first place. And the second one is that if you achieve that, then you get that exponential growth because suddenly it's exposed to millions of people. And the bookstores, again, like you say, limited shelf space, they're not likely to take a punt on books they don't know are going to sell. But if it's proven, if it's in the New York Times top 10, they know it's obviously a bestseller, so they'll create shelf space. And I remember, I think I was in Heathrow Airport on a trip to the States the first time I saw your book on the newsstand at the front of the store. So, yeah, a lot of sales generated that. And a question I wanted to ask you is very interesting that 7,000 of those pre-sales came from just 14 buyers, as well as obviously they wanted to get the bonuses. But was there a particular type of buyer that was going for those big number offers? Because that's something that if we know who those type of people are going to be, you can reach out to them and try and get more of those people. Again, 80-20 strategy.
Well, yes, there were a specific type of buyer, but this was specific to my industry. So,
yeah,
listeners, basically it comes down to what do you have that is immensely valuable? What would people pay you $7,000, $8,000, $10,000 for right now? What would they love for you to do for them for about $10,000?
So it's a principle that's a principle that you can transfer to a different industry, isn't it? So
sure. So it depends. For example, would you, John, or would some of our listeners currently deliver to their clients, right? In my specific case, because I own a seminar business, one of the offers was you can be a sponsor of our event. Now, it doesn't have to be this. If I were a consultant, I could say to companies, listen, I'll give you 10 days of free consulting or 3 days of free consulting. I'll deliver free training for your team for $10,000. But you don't need to pay me $10,000. Just buy 500 copies of the book. In this instance, with my campaign, one of the offers that worked the best was you can license my DVD home study courses, which filmed our previous seminar, so they could license them and then sell those DVDs to their clients and keep 100% of the money. The other offer was, I will promote your events. So for example, you're having a telesummit, you could have a live workshop, I could email my list for you in exchange for you buying copies of the book. And one offer that worked really well was that I will have you speak at my next seminar if you buy 500 copies of my book. So that worked very well as well. We had one person buy 800 copies of the book for me to promote their seminar, and we had somebody else buy 1,000 copies of the book. So that was $20,000 to license my DVD home study courses. Now, it would have cost them $40,000 normally, but I did a deal with them where it will only cost them $20,000 if they buy 1,000 copies of the book. And now, as you can imagine, all this required quite a bit of reaching out, negotiating, selling, pitching,
Yeah.
But that's what you have to do to sell 11,000 copies of your book, or 10,000 copies in this instance. It required this kind of creativity and hustle and making things happen, and to make things happen. And so basically, that's what it entails. If you go to the website, you check out Tim Ferriss's page as well, where he does his Land Rush book promotion, you'll see what I mean. There's about 25, 30 different offerings there for anything from, if you buy 1, 3, 5, up to, I think it's 5,000 or even 10,000 copies of Tim's book. So if you buy 500 copies, you get to spend a weekend with Tim, or something like that, or 4 hours with him in San Francisco, right? So again, It depends on what can you offer of value to your tribe.
And it's interesting, that Land Rush campaign that Tim did, that you've done, it's a little bit like sort of a Kickstarter or an Indiegogo type campaign, isn't it? Where you've got different tiers of things that people can, it's very, very similar in that respect. And of course, we know how successful those are being. And another question, you get your pre-sales, you get your 10,000 pre-sales. What's the logistics? Because obviously we know that with the New York Times bestseller list, They need to go through certain outlets. You can't just do them all through Amazon, for example. You know, there's got to be a bit of a spread there. So how do the logistics work to process those sales?
So it has to go through specific online book retailers and offline physical bookstores.
Mm.
And I don't know which ones those are exactly, but
No,
they're
they don't
all
really tell me.
US
Yeah.
based. They're US based. And so, and part of the rules is that no more than 6,000 copies can be bought in bulk. Now, when you're doing these campaigns, like I said, people bought 500, 800, or 1,000 copies. Most of them didn't want a delivery of 500 or 1,000 copies. They just wanted maybe they wanted 50, maybe 20, but they really wanted the bonuses. So that meant they were buying the books, but we were ending up with the books in our hands, in a sense. It was in the storage in San Diego, as far as I remember, so the logistics of it involved buying those books directly from the publisher in that 1 week period, different bookstores. It's part of what I paid the mentor to do. His
Mm.
team went out and made those purchases for us. So using all their different accounts and credit cards, they went out and made those 10,000 purchases of the book. The 6,000 that were in bulk were actually shipped by boat to the UK, because a lot of buyers were in the UK, because that's where my main business is. And the remaining were sent to media, our clients in the US, media contacts in the US, bloggers in the US, on a single book basis.
Mm.
And so that's what it entailed in that 1 week period. So there was a team of people going out and actually physically buying it online and offline. All the book sales went to it went through first to this warehouse in San Diego, and from then on they basically shipped it to the buyers.
Okay, well, that's really interesting, and that's brought up something that I hadn't really considered before. Because we talk about a New York Times bestseller. Obviously, New York Times is a US-based book chart, and but with a strategy like this one, you can actually tap into the whole world. So it's like that's really powerful, that you can, and you can still buy them through the yes and ship them out and distribute them, but you can benefit from worldwide sales to help give you that extra edge there. So I mean, and anything else that you think is worth mentioning in terms of other things that will help this strategy succeed? Anything that we haven't covered as part of this?
The main thing, I guess, is it's about knowing how to sell your product. And really, all I did was I went to that website, the Tim Ferriss website, and I just modeled that page. I've since then seen it repeated by many, many different experts and speakers and authors out there. It's a pretty basic, not basic, website where people do these land rush type of promotions. I'll say this: yes, the New York Times bestseller list. It's a U.S.-based measurement or qualification in a sense, but it's known worldwide. So whether it's a publisher in India or Poland or Australia or South America somewhere, they really respect and they value that stamp of approval, as it were.
Yeah.
And so do many readers as well.
Mm.
You mentioned, for example, that you were going through Heathrow Airport in the UK and you saw a stand with my book on there. Was that the first time that you came across my name, or you knew me from before?
No, I knew you before through the seminars, but that was the first time I remember seeing your book, sort of front and center.
Well, the amazing thing is this: I've had amazing people come into my life the last few years, thanks to that book being in bookstores, in airports, for example. I've had billionaires approach me. I've had very successful people from all around the world bring up opportunities for me based on this. Oh, and that was another thing that my mentor told me at the time, was that if you really want to make a big splash in the media, if you want your book to become newsworthy in and of itself, get it onto the New York Times bestseller list. So it's, if you're just a book author, okay, you might get a little bit of screen time, you might get some press. But if you're the author of a New York Times bestselling book, then you're much more likely to get on TV. You're much more likely to get interviewed in major publications. It just adds a whole new level of credibility to your entire business. And something else, actually, yes, there is something else to mention, which is this. The biggest outcome I saw from all of this was that my email open rates doubled. My email click-through rates doubled or tripled. My conversion rates increased dramatically. Basically, all my online activities that I'd been doing before for years suddenly just became easier. And the only thing that changed was that level of credibility. Before it was, oh, Mark Anastasi is sending me emails. Now it's New York Times bestselling author Mark Anastasi is sending me emails. And it just makes things much more easy, I guess, and simple. It catapults you to many levels beyond the average expert out there. My friend Daniel Priestley wrote a book called, he wrote The Entrepreneur Revolution, but he also wrote How to Become a Key Person of Influence. How to become a key person of influence in your industry. And he explained that out of 100 people in your industry, there are just a handful right at the top that earn 90% of the income in that industry. And the remaining 90% are earning just the bottom 10% of the income, or they're fighting for that bottom 10%. And he said that publishing a book is a great way to leapfrog a lot of your competition in your marketplace, and increase your income, of course, and attract more clients. And so that worked very well in terms of credibility, of branding, of improving the online sales conversion statistics. And then I did something else, which is I modeled the I forget his name. He wrote the Messenger, the something Messenger.
Millionaire Messenger?
The Millionaire
Brendan
Messenger.
Burchard.
Brendan Burchard. There we go, that guy, Brendan Burchard. So he followed exactly the strategy that I just shared with you to become a New York Times bestselling author. He actually used the services of my mentor as well, and he pre-sold a certain number of books, got into the New York Times bestseller list. But the next step of this, because you're not going to make money necessarily just from selling the book. My first royalty check from the book, after we generated about $250,000 in book sales, my first royalty check was $700.
That's drum roll please, $700.
Yeah, drum roll please. Now they'd send me $10,000 in advance, so that was after the $10,000 advance was repaid, I guess, from the book sales. They sent the first check, $700. And the interesting thing about the contract was this: they were saying to me that, hey, you're going to get 12% royalties, 15%, 18%, 20% in royalties if you make this number of book sales. And I was like, hey, great, this is much better than the 50 cents or $1 per book that I'd been hearing from other authors and other publishers. I was like, great, this is such a good, this is a good rate. I can live with that percentage, sounds good. After all, they're doing the printing, the distribution, why not? And like I said, I wasn't really looking for that income, but that would have been nice. And something that I didn't quite notice in the contract that I'd signed with them was this: a small paragraph that said, if we sell your book for less than $11 in bulk, for less than $11, you only get this much per book, like a tiny amount per book. And they sold all of the books to bookstores around the world for 10. Basically, almost all the sales. So what happens is that they sell them to the bookstores for $10.50. The bookstores charge $20, $24. They make their money there, and the author is left with maybe some, peanuts, 10 cents.
Very sneaky, isn't it? Very sneaky.
Yeah, that was very sneaky, and that I didn't. And of course, it was my first time dealing with publishers. I didn't quite, wasn't aware of that. But anyway, fast forward a few months, I follow what Brendon Burchard does. And what Brendon Burchard did is he published a book, got it on the New York Times bestseller list, and then he did a tour. He did a seminar tour. Actually, I think, no, he did two large-scale seminars. It was $2,000 to attend each seminar, and he generated, I think he generated a couple of $1 million from those seminars. And I thought, okay, well, I know how to do seminars, so I put together a world tour. And we ran 12 seminars in 12 weeks in Sydney, Australia, Melbourne, Brisbane, Los Angeles, Toronto, London, Switzerland, Zurich in Switzerland. We did Dubai, and then we did London again. We did Sydney again, and then a couple of more cities. We spoke in Cyprus as well. And so in a 12-week period, we sold $1.7 million worth of our products and services, and we had 2,200 people attend these 12 events. So that was on the business side of things. That's where that whole investment in writing the book, rewriting the book, doing the campaign, that's where we got a return on that investment in financial terms. In terms of the satisfaction that comes from all these testimonials that are being sent through, people saying that the book changed their lives. I've had people say to me that it's the best written book they've ever read, which I found very surprising because I wasn't writing it, for it to be like particularly well written. Although I must say they did such an excellent job at editing the book at Wiley Publishing that it reads beautifully. It's amazing, way better than what I could have done by myself. So anyway, so that's kind of the end of that story, I guess. In 2012, we published the book. In 2013, we did this world tour. 2,200 people attended, and it generated a lot of sales. But as I'm looking forward, I'm realizing, you know what? For me to add more value to more people, I need to publish many, many more books. So that's kind of the next step for us.
That's great, great. That 1.7 million, and was that dollars or pounds? I forgot.
That's in dollars.
In dollars. So that $1.7 million is a lot more exciting than that $700 check, and very interesting. And I've forgotten what I was going to. I was going to say something, and I've forgotten what it was. We'll move on.
We'll move on. That's fine.
Yeah, that's great. But
people hear these amounts and they think, oh, that sounds great. I want some of that, etc. It could have been 5 million, it could have been 1 million, it could have been 10, 12 million. I've seen people do much better. I've seen people do worse with these types of campaigns. I always have this philosophy that the exact right number of people and the exact right people show up at your events. Whoever's on this Self-Publishing Summit 2015 today, this week, they are exactly the right people. You could have think, oh, maybe we could have had another 500 people. No, it's the exact right number of people. And to move forward, instead of thinking about how can I make more money or how can I increase my sales, instead of thinking just along those lines, it really helps to think about how can I serve more people. For example, you might say, I want to serve 50,000 customers this year. Great. How can I serve 50,000 customers this year? So, yeah, that's my way of looking at this.
Good. Well, I think that's a great philosophy, and that goes, that works very well with the mindset shift we talked about at the beginning of the presentation. So, Mark, huge thank you, because I know you have to jump onto a webinar in a second, so we've got to wrap things up. But tremendous insights there. I love the action that you take. I love that you've got the mentors at each stage, and you've modeled successful people. I think those are all tremendous learning points. If you're watching this, this is what you need to be doing to get that kind of level of success. And so huge thank you for that. I'm looking forward to the next books. There's going to be several, I hope. And so good luck with those. Before we finish up, how can people follow up with you? How can people get in touch and find out about your products and services?
Sure. I suggest that people go to laptopmillionaire.tv or also go to freedvd.tv to get a free DVD of one of our seminars. That's freedvd.tv. Or they can reach me through Facebook. They can find me on the Facebook Mark Anastasi Facebook fan page, for example. That would be a great way to start.
Fantastic. So, Mark, big thank you for being part of the Self-Publishing Summit. It's great to have you on. And again, another big thank you for taking us through how to become a New York Times bestselling author. Fantastic stuff. And as I say, very good luck for your next New York Times bestseller.
Thank you very much, John. Thank you
Cheers,
for
Mark.
inviting me to this summit. Thank you.
Cheers, Mark. Bye-bye.